Stupid reverse.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are starting late because I realized I sent out the wrong link. And so I apologize to everyone that was looking forward to this at 7, but it's 7:14, so we're not too far off. Thank you all for joining us for this presidential discussion. My name is Tracy. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves um, later in a bit. We're going to pay some bills. I'll tell you the rules of engagement this evening, and you can tell all things are serious because I have my glasses on, but they may come off here in just a moment. So definitely subscribe to the channel. Um, I am still stuck at 143. 3 months, I'm still at 143. I want more. I would love 300. My goal was 1,000, but then I realized, oh, probably not going to get 1,000, but 300 would be really good before my birthday. Um, and you can also support me at have two guests as opposed to one. So we will start off normally in this fashion. So these rules the candidates have agreed to. Each candidate will have probably up to 3 minutes to answer questions. Um, I would ask that our candidates not interrupt each other. I know you probably won't do that. If there is a question that you would like to address to the candidate specifically, you'll let me know first, and then I will say yes, you can, or no, you cannot, but I probably will let you. Of course, this is my platform, so you will not be hearing any profanities this evening. Um, Anyone that breaks the rules, I will take them off very quickly. And we are going to be talking about foreign policy. But before we get into our discussion, I want the candidates to introduce themselves. And I'm going to let Frankie go first because he's never been on the platform before.
I'm Frankie Lozada. I am running on the Democratic line. I am the first Puerto Rican candidate to ever attempt to run for presidency. And as of the current listings, I am the only Latino in the race because the mayor of Miami, who was running on the Republican Party, has dropped out. Born and raised in New York, did a lot of work by the Mexican border, have some pretty solid immigration policies. I actually just had an incredible experience, an event with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Georgia, where RFK Jr. and I pretty much held down the fort there, and it was quite a beautiful experience. So looking forward to the discussion and ready to go.
And is that short for Francis or is it actually Frankie?
So, fun fact, I was named after my grandfather, who was Francisco. And my aunt interjected when I was born and said that I needed to have a more Americanized name. Otherwise, I would get bullied. So, my official legal name is Frank Lozada. But Frankie sounds a lot more younger. Frank's a little older. I also ran for Congress last year, and my opponent was very, very, very petty and tried to. One of the objections he had was I misled voters because I used Frankie Lozada instead of Frank Lozada. I see the jump, so maybe I kind of see where he was going with it. I don't believe Ted Cruz campaigns under Rafael Eduardo Cruz, but it happens.
Samuel.
Yeah, so my name's Samuel Ronan. I'm running for president as well. I don't know how many firsts I necessarily fall under, so I won't even get into that. I am a veteran. I am an American citizen. I have served my country, and I left active duty to serve my country directly. What I realized was that military service no longer serves the needs of the people, nor does it protect and defend the Constitution. What it does is serve private interests. And so I'm running in the Republican Party, partially to put my money where my mouth was back in 2017, but also because I want to go straight for the jugular of those who are the problem. And therefore, going after the direct target, Trump, and acquiring the Republican nomination is the most direct way to that particular goal. As far as credentials, I haven't been able to hold down the fort with other presidential candidates, but I have done plenty of public speaking engagements. I've led plenty of marches, and I ran for DNC chair back in 2017, and then also ran for Congress, Senate, and governor in the Republican, Green Party, and I believe Green Party, respectively. So lots of experience working with other politicians, other people in those particular realms, and very well versed in what is going on. So talking about foreign policy for our discussion here is something that I look forward to.
And I want everyone in the audience that knows that I normally interview third-party candidates, don't get confused because Frankie is a Democrat and Samuel is a Republican. I have been known to bring people from, quote, the other side, especially when I think that they have independent leanings. I believe these two gentlemen fit that description. If I'm wrong, I'm just wrong, but I'm pretty sure they do. So I wouldn't have invited them. So don't say, well, they're a Democrat and one's a Republican. No, we're going to go with their independent leaning. And remember, if you put questions in the comment section, I may not get to them, but I will make sure to jot them down and get them back to the candidates. We will also be doing another one in March of 2024 that will be talking about domestic issues. So this is not the last presidential debate. First question, and I think I'm probably going to take these off because they're starting to annoy me. Sorry, I tried to put my glasses on and apparently they're just irritating me. We're talking about foreign policy and and I'm sorry, let me backtrack. The way this speaking order is going to work, I will start with Frank first and then Samuel second, and then kind of halfway through I'll change the order and let Samuel go first, or do you prefer Sam?
Either way.
Okay, I'll let Sam go first and then Frankie go second. So the conflict, a ceasefire, there have been some Congress people that reluctantly, because of the protests, they have called for a ceasefire. And this is a two-part question. One, do you support what President Biden is stating, saying that no, there shouldn't be a ceasefire, there should be more of a, I don't know what he calls it, because I have a name for it, but that's neither here nor there. He calls it providing humanitarian aid. Don't block that. I know, Samuel, I know, but I'm just saying that's what he calls it. And do you support the president on that? And if you don't, what type of tactic would you take to deal with that particular situation? And as I said, I'm going to let Frankie go first. You have 3 minutes, and then Samuel will have 3 minutes also.
So to give you guys in on a little personal thing, it is a very heavy topic on me. I am pro ceasefire. What's happening is a humanitarian atrocity. I actually just recently, which it should be coming out soon, I did aid in the removal of, it started with 5, but now we're at 11 Americans who were trapped in Gaza, now are in Cairo on their way back to the United States. And what I dislike about the situation is we're funding it just blindly. You know, I understand who our allies are and who we need to protect. I get that. I understand that completely. But as allies and as people who are funding this situation, the United States has all of the authority and be able to check our allies. And we have the responsibility to be able to say, hey, you're doing things in the wrong way. Not that you don't have the right to protect yourself, but their approach is terrible. And me being in communications with these families, the stories, the pictures, like it's not news that's feeding me any information. I have it on my phone. I have it record from living witnesses. And I can't tolerate that. That's the killing of innocent people. That's the equivalent as if when we got attacked in 9/11, we just went and nuked the entire country, which we know is absolutely wrong. And so I think a ceasefire is absolutely necessary. And the fact that we have somebody in charge that's blindly following a terrible government, And I'll tell you where the misconception is because I hear the word anti-Semitism a lot, and I even got called an anti-Semite because of my stance on it. But let's break down the word anti-Semitism. What is a Semite? It's a Semite is a person who speaks 3 of the Semitic languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. So how am I an anti-Semite if I'm also advocating for Semitic people? It's not synonymous to Jewish and only those. And that's what's happened historically is Israel has made a determination to make Jewish synonymous, completely disregarding the fact that Israel is a very diverse country. You have Christians, you have Muslims, it's holy land to all of these core religions. And yet, when you talk about Israel, automatically they make it associated with, oh, he's targeting Jewish people. And it's not the case. And that's also a bad comparison to put those two together, because now if we're fighting with Israel, that's where you have a lot of the anti-Israeli attacks here and Jewish people getting attacked here, because there is no separation between Israel, the state, and Israel and Jewish, the religion. And so even people who of Jewish faith who are living there are calling for the ceasefire. They've had enough of it. And what's also being ignored, which I don't like, is yes, you want to target Hamas? Great. Hamas has a reign and presence in Gaza, not the West Bank. So why are we infiltrating the West Bank? Why are we catching hostages in the West Bank? Why are we bombing the West Bank? So I don't agree with that policy at all. I think he needs to take accountability. I think that we need to have a better approach and to even our own self hold our own government accountable.
Is it all right if I go?
Well,
Okay.
let me reset the clock because I thought you were going to go to 3 minutes. Okay, you may go ahead.
All right. So, like Frankie, I disagree.
I didn't know how much time I still had.
So, like Frankie, I 100% disagree with what the president is doing. But from the perspective of someone who has served and as someone who has unfortunately lost people due to the repercussions of deployment and what they've had to do, and seeing firsthand what we did to the Middle East and how that led to my motivations to for enlisting in the first place. It's all propaganda, right? And when you're the most powerful, wealthy, whatever nation in the world, empire in the world, then you have a responsibility to the global community. But if all you choose to do is oppress, then you're in violation of international law. And thankfully, there is international law, the Geneva Conventions. Mm-hmm. What Biden and the United States and Israel are doing are war crimes that can be held accountable via the Geneva Conventions. And if it were up to me, I would be sending our entire administration, to include President Joe Biden and the leadership of Israel, to The Hague for war crimes and crimes against humanity, because that is exactly what it is. This isn't about ceasefire. This is ethnic cleansing. This is genocide. And it's exactly what we did to Native Americans and Indigenous Americans and Indigenous peoples from all the way down to Central America, all the way through up to the border of Alaska. I mean, sure, there's Canada now that is a buffer between that. However, America's atrocities live on today. We have Native American reservations who are mistreated, who are forced into poverty, who are forced to endure some of the most atrocious standards of living in modern times. So what is happening in Palestine by Israel through us is proxy genocide, which is worse than what Nazis did to the Jews, because we have the Nazis as an example of what not to do. We are failing an open book test. So I would take a significantly more aggressive approach to a ceasefire with immediate condemnation and legal recourse with this issue.
Okay, so now I definitely have some follow-up questions, because both of you have had me thinking. To be honest, I know we have an international court. I know that. But that's an idea that hasn't been played in the media enough for me to sit down and think about it. Yeah, well, understand. So I want to ask a question to you, and you'll have a minute. No, 2 minutes. I'll give you 2 minutes. And then, Frankie, I have a question about yours because your answer, both of your answers really have me not concerned, but I just have some follow-up questions I have to ask. So, Samuel, you're talking about bringing the United States of America. The leadership represents all 300 and I don't know how many people we have, 330 million. I'll just throw out a number. Mm-hmm. That's how many people that the United States has. So the World Court, which from my understanding is controlled by the United States. And if I'm wrong, you can tell me if I'm wrong. But in my opinion, it seems to be controlled by the US. So one, if you're a president, if you're a president, how do you sell to the American people, okay, we're going to bring charges against ourselves because you would be president. And second, if the United States controls the courts, as I think they do, and again, I could be wrong about this, then wouldn't the punishment be light?
Excellent question and an excellent concern. I want to state unequivocally, I don't claim to be an international lawyer, so I'm not an expert on this. What I do know is that the conception that the United States has full authority over the International Court is sort of true. When it comes to the United Nations, the United States has absolute veto power, meaning if every other nation votes aye, the United States can vote nay and it doesn't pass. But there's other countries that have that same power, Russia, and I do believe China. There are, I think, several others. And I know there are several others, but those are the big three, right? So would the United States get off light? No. Secondly, how would I sell it? Very easily. I'm not putting myself on trial. I got elected to president. Now I'm going to go and take responsibility for what these chuckleheads did. No, I'm putting President Joe Biden on the stand, his administration, and any other former or living president who has also engaged in allowing this or leading up to this conflict to perpetuate. All of them are going down. And if The Hague somehow finds them innocent, well, guess what? We have laws too in our nation at the federal level that have, qualms with things like war crimes, weapons proliferation, crimes against humanity, slaughtering the innocent, violating the Geneva Conventions, yada, yada, yada. For instance, as a military member, hopefully I don't get drafted, but had I deployed while I was active duty to some sort of combat zone and I shot an innocent civilian because I feared for my life, I would be dishonorably discharged and in Fort Leavenworth for violating either the rules of engagement or the LOA.
You have 9 seconds.
In either case, there is legal justification without ramifications of seeming soft by doing this. It shows accountability.
And you hear that, Sam? Okay, so thank you for that answer because I knew that's what you meant, but I always ask questions that people in our audience are thinking. And remember, to the people that are actually watching, you can still drop your questions in the chat. And again, if they're there, I can't guarantee I will get to them, but I will do my very, very best. So my question to you, Frankie, is this, and I didn't think I would have follow-up questions, but it just really came to mind. When you said propose a ceasefire, that's what I think the president should do. But here is my scenario. Benjamin Netanyahu has already said, I'm not listening to a ceasefire. I'm not going to do it. What would be, if he says no to a ceasefire, which is what he's already said, do you, A, stop funding Israel and get the wrath of the AIPAC? Or do you, B, say, you know what, maybe we turn weapons on you? And I know I guess what I'm getting to is, what is your solution if Netanyahu says, I don't want to hear about it? And basically he's doing it now. He's saying, I don't want to talk about a ceasefire is not possible. what is it that you do? And you have 2 minutes.
He has the authority because we empower him. And at the end of the day, if we stop empowering them and saying, hey, here's endless amounts of money to just cause destruction. Now, if you want to talk about the conflict, let's talk about before even the Hamas attacks. If you look at the injuries compared to casualties from Palestinians to Israelis, I want to say just from, if you want to count Hamas time, from 2005 until the attacks, I want to say the number of deaths of Palestinians was around 6,400, whereas the amount of injuries was about 152,000. If you look at the Israeli side, during that same time frame, the number of injuries was only around 6,400. The number of deaths is 300. So it's obviously been disproportionate this entire time. But it's like if you go back to football, football was less exciting when they didn't have helmets. When they had helmets, they now had protection. And when they had protection, they're more likely to use it. And now they dig their helmets into people, they grab on face masks, and it's a lot more violent and it's a lot more exciting to watch. So when you give them and provide them that equipment, they're going to use it. And they're going to use it to their advantage and to instill fear. Now, if we sit there and say, hey, slow it down or change your approach, and they don't, then guess what? I'm not funding anymore. And when you slow down the funding, you make them vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, all of a sudden, hey, let me slow my roll around. Because right now, every single Arab nation is watching. And in fact, they've already engaged in some warfare with other Arab nations. So if that doesn't work, we cannot associate, because that also puts us at risk. That puts us in aggression with the other Arab nations. It causes diversity and friction here in the States. And basically, that's pretty much you got it.
And I know that sound is going to get on you guys' nerves, but it will be with us all night. And so I want to stay on this discussion of Israel. I will move into other foreign policy issues. I'll move into Ukraine situation. I'll definitely do some more things that the United States has done worldwide. But I want to stay with this issue because I specifically want to talk about the pro-Israel side. And this question is directly to Frankie. So, and maybe, no, it can be for you too, Samuel. Why does it seem, and I know the answer to this, but I want you all to discuss it. Why does it seem that our politicians, like the American people, are saying we don't want this war, we have troubles at home, we have homelessness, we have food deserts, we have poverty, we have healthcare, we have all of these needs here, where you're telling us we don't have enough money, but you're sending money to Israel. I think Biden proposed $100 million. If I have the number right, I may not. Why is it seem he's so open to doing this? And other Republicans are like, no, let's cut. I even heard Josh Hawley say, let's cut the money to Ukraine and give it to Israel. Where does Israel get this unilateral support? It's just anything that it seems to want to do, the United States government. See, I know the answer, but again, I want you all to discuss this. And why is it that they are so emboldened to say, okay, everything that you do, fine with us. And I know there's AIPAC and I know there's money, but there's something a little deeper here that I want you all to get to, because I think it's a little bit deeper than money. I mean, money's obviously the answer, but there's other factors that kind of get into this. And again, Frank, because Joe Biden's the president, you're running to primary him, you get to go first and you have 3 minutes.
It doesn't even take 3 minutes. It's all comes down to money. If you look at even all of the media executives, the reason why a lot of that is being shadow banned and pulled to the side is because they're owned by a lot of Jewish executives. There's always been a significant amount of money, and the Jewish community does a great job of keeping that money collectively within their communities. So they use that power to leverage our politicians. Plus, it gives us a reason to be in the Middle East. If you've ever noticed and tracked a lot of the movements into the expansion of Israel in certain places, coincidentally, we start getting very close to a lot of oil lines. Even within Syria, even in the Gaza Strip, it's actually predicted that they found a huge source of oil reservoir right around there. And then magically, now all of a sudden, tension started to uprise. So it's always going to come down to money, 1000%. Now, regardless of the fact, they are an ally. I understand about keeping my ally safe. That's what we do. You watch my back, I watch yours. So I understand his approach on being that cooperative with our allies. But like I said before, it's about accountability. Because I'm such a close ally, I should have that responsibility in that relationship to say, hey, I got your back normally, but let's talk about this. Because now we have that playing field. If I'm an aggressor, then no, obviously there's no discussion. I can't sit there and say, hey, stop bombing me. But no, in this case, this is my ally. This is my friend. I should be able to sit there and say, hey, let's talk about this. I'm willing to help you up to a point. I want you to be safe because we care about you, but let's do this way. And if we can't separate that, I'm not with it. But, it just really comes down to a lot more of the money, and that's what I don't like. I actually looked into World War II around this kind of because of this interaction with the Middle East. And I was always wondering why specifically, the Jews are targeted. And what I had discovered doing deep research, one that weren't actually written by people of the Jewish faith, one of the speculations is that Hitler was upset that the economy in Germany was declining significantly, and that all of the money was being held and just constricted to the Jewish communities. And so he wanted to expel them in that sense, and make the money kind of flow around in the economy, because they were just being selfish in his eyes in holding it and kind of ruining it. So he blamed the downfall of the economy, not necessarily because they were Jewish by faith or because he didn't like the Jewish religion. It was just the fact that he didn't like how they were constricting the economy. Now, it might be. That just is what research shows. It may not be.
Okay. Yeah. And you had 5 seconds to spare. Okay.
Try.
And now, Samuel, it is now your time to respond.
So now I kind of have to, I was actually just really engaged to your answer, so I don't even quite remember the question at this point. Why are we over there and why is it happening, I think was the essence of the question. And I'm glad you brought up the oil because I was going to do that as well. And it's infuriating because we can talk about Ukraine for the same reason. They have one of the largest lithium deposits in the world, if not the largest lithium deposit in the world. We're at the 4th largest in the world, but the largest in Europe. It's disgusting, the underlying economic reasons why these conflicts are happening. But why does the Jewish community, the Hebrew community, the Israeli community have such a strong impact in American politics? Yeah, we can argue AIPAC, we can argue that, but I mean, it's not like there aren't billionaires elsewise funding the Republican or the Democratic Party, right? I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, as much as he's blatantly and publicly ruining Twitter before our very eyes, he's still a multi-billionaire, one of the richest people on the planet. He could influence things as much as he wants. So what does it truly come down to? And I think it is truly ringing the bell of, well, we were victims in World War II, so you have to protect us. You were the good guys. You liberated us, so you owe us. You have to protect us. The problem is the oppressed has become the oppressor. And to your point where you said that our allies need to be protected, yes, our allies need to be protected if they are being attacked, if they are being aggressed, if they are being oppressed, if they are being in some way victimized, then we step in. But when they are the oppressor, not only should we step in, but we must. And the fact that we are instead aiding them and funding them in their genocide and their ethnic cleansing is unacceptable. So if Netanyahu says, no, not only would I cease all trade with them, I would also use military force to stop them and then again take them to international court because, again, tyrants and do not respect law or anything less than outright aggression. Now, back to the influence. I'm of German descent. Unfortunately, one of my great grandfathers died in World War II because he was drafted, as many young German men were, and was killed in that conflict. And I had family members who are of the Jewish faith who wanted to throw that in my face when I said, you can't just blatantly and blindly support Israel massacring and committing genocide against Palestine because of the Holocaust. You cannot Holocaust someone else and say, well, I was Holocausted, so I'm okay with what that's doing. And then throwing that in my face that my heritage is to blame. It's like, well, look in the mirror. America has been doing it since its inception. And that's kind of my aggressive approach to it, the backing.
Okay, so I'm still going to stay. I promise to the audience, and I see we have some viewers now. I'm going to move past this Israel issue. I promise I will. One more question here. And this, even though I said Frankie first, I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to let him go first. And then Frankie. So here is my question. I believe all three of us, well, no, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I believe what you were both saying is you do not agree with what Netanyahu is doing. Even the people who are in Israel are saying, no, we don't agree with this. What steps would you take to support the people of Israel democratically removing Netanyahu? Samuel, you have 3 minutes.
So that's an interesting question. One, I genuinely don't know what the limits of the powers of the president are with regards to election tampering. Obviously, I could say, hey, there's an Israeli leader who, does not support the ethnic cleansing and eradication of Palestine. I support him or her, and I hope that they win their election. I believe I could do that. But again, with the options of president as a nation, as head of state, there are the two primary options, which is embargo trade and using the international court system and bringing charges against Netanyahu and his administration. Because again, trade embargoes can have the unfortunate impact of negatively impacting the citizenry, the innocent, right? I don't want to. They have universal health care because we give them $18 billion a year, right? And taking that away means they don't have health care, which means now we're the baddies. But at the same time, if they're not spending that $18 billion in healthcare and instead using it on missiles, bombs, aircraft, and everything else under the sun to massacre these people, whose land, by the way, they are occupying illegally anyway, whole other topic that I don't think I can cover in 3 minutes. We need to find a way to enforce that the funds that they receive cannot be used for weapons. And if they are used for weapons, that's immediate grounds for charges and the necessary actions to implement and enforce those charges. And in that way, you can do a weapons trade embargo without impacting the regular domestic trade embargo. Beyond that, I think any sort of election tampering would be violating their sovereignty.
I hope I wasn't suggesting election tampering. I mean,
No,
we already do it, but I'm just...
We do it, but I don't think there's an ethical way to, I guess, influence that nation's elections other than by saying, yeah, Netanyahu needs to go, and I like this person and that person. Y'all should have an election or something. I think that's about the limit that we can do, and I think that's about the limit that most nations have, other than, of course, sanctions and embargoes and all that other fun stuff.
Okay, so I will reset. And now, Frankie, you may respond.
So I can't use profanity. So I am a strong believer of, mess around and find out. And obviously, as I mentioned before, diplomacy is the most important avenue to take. And when dialogue is not working, I do believe that when we're no longer aligned, then sanctions need to. I need to stop the funding and the sanctions. And that should be enough to take it out of our hands. And if you do that, then like I said, but prior to that, if diplomacy does not work, first steps would be to locate and remove every single American citizen from Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, or from any impacted area, because if we were to take that avenue, the risks and things that would, the actions would be drastic. 1000%. It's not a game. Like, that's what they have been waiting for. That's the reason why we've been backing Israel. And that's the reason why there hasn't been any kind of internal conflict, is because we've had their back. And so I think it's in their best interest, because could we declare war? Yes. Could we then charge him with crimes? I suppose. I don't know the legalities of the as well, but I'd rather not touch those avenues. I'd usually like to let them figure it out themselves. And I think they're more than capable to do so. And that's the way I would take it. Like I said, it's either you work with us or, sorry, mess around and find out.
And Mac, I do see your question, but again, we're going to hold off on getting questions from the audience, and they're going to respond to just my questions. But if we do have time, we'll get back to them. So just keep posting your question. I do see it. And I think you've asked this question before. But just wanted to let you know I do see your question. So I'm moving from the Israel position, because I said I would. And I want to talk about something that I'll actually be talking on my Thursday program. And this is about BRICS. So for those who don't know what BRICS is, it is a coalition of countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that have all combined their, I don't even know how to say it. They formed a coalition where they would have trade agreements among themselves. But significant in this trade agreement, they are leaving out, they specifically named the United States. They were real specific about, we don't want America in this. Their mission is to challenge, and I didn't know this, they said to challenge the economic strength, which I didn't know we had economic strength, because we have so many homes. This is news to me, but this is their mission, to challenge the economic strength of the United States and other Western countries. They didn't name Canada. They didn't name France. They didn't name Mexico. They didn't name Italy. They didn't name England. They specifically have said, no, we want to challenge the United States. My question, and this will go to Sam first, Frankie second, how would you handle, as president, this new coalition forming? And I'm not going to give out scenarios. I'm just going to ask, how would you deal with it? And you have 3 minutes.
The good news is, if I were to become president, I don't think this coalition would feel the need to exist. That being said, it exists. Let's say that happens. Same thing with OPEC, same thing with all the other treaties and trade agreements that exist to try and circumvent and undermine the American empire. The nation of the United States of America. The reason why there is all of this anti-American rhetoric going and proliferating throughout the world is because we are acting like the PC term would be jackwagons. The United States is becoming the very thing we swore to never become. And we are abusing that power. We are invading nations left, right, and center. We are using our economic might, which we do have plenty of, believe that or not, to decimate other nations in their either burgeoning economies or circumventing their democratic processes through the CIA, FBI, or whatever other black ops organization is out there, so that we can cause instability in that area, talk to their corporate leaders, and then gain access to their natural resources. Again, this is all about control. For the past 12,000 years, humanity has not evolved past feudalism. And it's ignorant. It's stupid. It is unnecessary. We should be on Mars sipping coffee, talking about the next flight to Alpha Centauri. But instead, we are hashing out the same tired tropes of borders, which are invisible lines, natural resources, which we have the technology and means to either replicate or replace with other cleaner, more, accessible means and capabilities to end world hunger, to end economic scarcity, end homelessness, and the need for any ounce of poverty. But it comes down to greed, corruption, and control. I have no idea how much time I have left.
58 seconds.
Oh, sweet. So what I would say to them is, please continue your economic coalition. We, under my leadership and my administration, with all of us collectively working together, we will earn back your trust as a member of the global community.
You, Frankie, have 3 minutes.
So, of course, we are an economic impact in the world. I mean, if you look at even currency exchanges, everything right now, we are the central point, which I wish more people would pay attention to that, because what happened is when we started sanctioning Russia, previously, you would take your currency, transfer it to the US dollar, and then purchase another currency. And with all the sanctions, all these countries have taken advantage and now said, hey, Russia, if they won't trade with you, we will, which now takes the dollar out of the equation and creates more change, which in turn lowers the value of the dollar, increases inflation. But of course, we're not talking about that. We're not targeting it. We don't care about poverty of the people here. I don't care that they have that coalition. In fact, if you haven't noticed, China has already been trying to do that. There's something called the Chinese money trap. So basically, they make, I want to say their GDP is probably close to $15-16 trillion a year. I don't know how it shifted past the pandemic, but I know that it used to be at one point that we were about 12 or 13 trillion out of the 15. So we basically fund China, at which point China takes that money, because they have all control, and then loans it to countries knowing that they cannot repay it, and then they take slaves. Right now, if you didn't notice, the Chinese yen or yuan is some of the major currencies in other countries. In fact, they probably own most of the ports in Western Africa or Eastern Africa. And that's a huge portion of why we need to watch and be clear how they're moving. Now, I like to limit. If you guys want to do your own trade, great. My immigration policy actually works on stimulating growth in economy in a one America kind of way. Really, really enforcing and empowering the Western Hemisphere. We have all of the resource we have over there and all these people who are hungry to do it. And if you look at our immigration problem, which everybody seems to have a problem with, it's because they have socioeconomic problems in their own home countries. So if we work to alleviate that issue, there's less incentive for them to leave their families behind and suffer, and in turn reduces immigration, stimulates a centralized economy, and creates that economic growth, while also helps protect our borders and protect ourselves. And that's less money we need to spend on useless spending. But it's how it works, how the money goes, how lobbyists perform, and how they discuss. But,
Thank you. This is turning out to be a great discussion. I should always have 2 guests. No, I shouldn't, because I shouldn't. I take that back. So we've talked about BRICS, and you, Frankie, just brought up a situation that is affecting a lot of American cities, and that is the issue of immigration. I'm going to tell you firsthand, I'm not for closing the border. I say if you want to be here, you come here, you're a citizen, that's it. Let's get this thing finished, because I feel like we've ruined so many countries in terms of stealing their resources, in terms of introducing drugs into their communities, that you now have gangs in their communities that are destroying the communities. Who are we to compare? However, my question is, how do you, and I don't know whether you may be for limited immigration, and you may think there's a problem with immigrants coming in, I don't know. But how do you educate the American people on the fact that it's basically what we're seeing as an immigration problem is actually our fault? And Frankie, I'm going to let you Go first, and you have 3 minutes.
So I worked almost 2 years at the Mexican border in El Paso. I learned a lot from Border Patrol. They are actually very helpful in answering a lot of questions. I see firsthand the flaw in the system. And me, I also see the true stories, the things that the media doesn't show. I wish I hadn't seen a lot of what I've seen. I wish I hadn't heard a lot of what I heard. But I promise you that there was not a single day that I was ever threatened by anybody I came in contact with. Number one. A lot of them were some of the most religious people that entrusted their entire faith in that terrible journey. You know, the media will portray that. First off, they portray it's all Mexicans, which about 90-something% of everybody I had to deal with was probably Guatemalan. And then little bits and pieces. We even had Turkey, some parts of Africa. We had a lot of Venezuela, Honduras, Colombia, and Ecuador. Those trickled in, but majority of it was Guatemalan. You watch the news and you think that Mexico is just parading in with their Mexican flags and sombreros, just singing and doing all the dancing across, and it's not that easy. In fact, our immigration laws are even stricter on Mexico. So anybody we would detain that was Mexican, they didn't even care what part of Mexico you were from. You got walked right across the border. Sorry, have a good day. Try again later. At the end of the day, it's a money grab. All of our data comes from Border Patrol. So as an agency, if I do my job too well, you're going to get rid of me. So why would I perform to that aspect of not doing it? Now, I spoke to, in August, the ambassador from Mexico to the United States, Mr. Montezuma Barragan, and he's an incredible man. I love him dearly. We had some great conversations. And one of the things that I wanted to do with that, because of that knowledge that I have of the numbers of Guatemala coming in, is most of their journey is where they get exploited by all the cartels, and that's the most dangerous thing. That journey alone can take anywhere between 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, however long it takes them to journey up there. So instead of us spending all that money to secure a 2,000-mile border, our immigration problem is Mexico's immigration problem because it channels through there. So if we have a 2,000-mile border and the Mexico-Guatemalan border is only 500, a quarter of what we are, if we jointly used our resources, we can move our processing center down there and not worry about the deportation costs, because if most of them are coming from Guatemala, they're already in their home country and they could wait it out right there. And then if they safely qualify for everything else, we bring them in. Because what's happening now is I'm from New York. Ain't nobody gonna out hustle me. Right now we're getting hustled. The cartels make all this money. They bring it in. They charge about $10,000 per kid. So every 100 kids that come into this country, it's $1 million that we're missing out. And we're paying the tax dollars. So if they're willing to pay that to the cartels, I bet you if we sit there and say, hey, just like the student loan, let's give you a federal identification number, which they get anyway. It's called the A number. All right, sorry. But one more minute.
Honestly, he is okay to finish his thought. I am enraptured by this discussion.
I will give you 45 seconds.
Finish it up, Frankie.
That's all I need. So in that theory, if we can move them down there, I think since they already got an A number, they have an identification number, we can then track them. And I promise you, if you tell them, hey, you want to come to America, we'll give you a low interest loan of whatever it costs for the immigration process. They're creating the jobs. They're paying for the problem, not us. And they get to sit here and work here. Absolutely. I mean, majority of people coming in, believe it or not, are not uneducated. I mean, yeah, there is a huge percentage, but some of them I've met doctors, lawyers, skilled professionals who can't practice their own field here. And they come here and do the jobs that nobody wants to do. And we're wasting all of that talent. And we're funding it and just wasting it so that we could just prioritize whose pockets that money is going into. That's it.
Okay, so Samuel, since I gave Frankie 45 seconds extra, you now have 3 minutes, 45 seconds.
Oh, thank you. I was just interested to hear what Frankie had to say. As far as how do we address the immigration problem to the American people in such a way that they realize it's actually our fault that this immigration problem exists in the first place? So let me preface this by saying my mom is a naturalized citizen. She was a German citizen, had a green card for most of my life, and became an American citizen several years ago. So immigration is very near and dear to my heart. And I'll admit that I was not necessarily on the wrong side of it before, but I wasn't as generous as I am now because I was like, well, my mom went through it, so why can't other people go through it? But that goes into a whole different nuance. How do we convince the American people that this is American foreign policy causing it? The same exact way the propaganda convinces Americans that these immigrants are evil, murdering, rapist, drug cartel gang members. We just have to message. And here's the problem, right? It's not that we are unwilling to message. It's not that we don't have the funding to message, as we choose not to. Because again, there is no divide between the conservative or liberal party system. It's all one, controlled by corporations, which control the money, the power, the wealth, again, everything. The issue is we currently do not have the means of control. We do not have the control of our own First Amendment. The free press does not exist. The free press is what? 6 organizations owning over 12,000 different media deviations? That's insane. Now, as far as, what to do with the immigrants that are coming to our country, as Frankie said, the vast majority of them aren't Mexican. And in fact, the vast majority of them aren't even crossing the border. They're coming into other ports of entry, namely airports from Eastern European countries. Yet, because they look like Svetlana and Olga and all the other white-looking Eastern Slovenian women, we don't care because they're white, which brings a racial issue. We are a white supremacist nation, period, dot, end of sentence. So there is significant things that have to be discussed and addressed and overcome, and it would be almost impossible to do at once. You would have to layer it. First, you'd have to regain control of the media, which there are several different ways you could do that. But let's say the nicest way is we actually have real news. We go back to the shucks, I forgot what the law was, but there was a law that we had that got rescinded, of course.
Fairness doctrine.
That one. We got rid of that during the Clinton administration.
Reagan.
And now we have Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, right? So we reinstate that. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is then ensuring that whatever biases occur are actually telling the story. And then I think maybe over the course of probably a whole presidential term, we could start re-educating Americans. In the meantime, immigrants are still fleeing the destruction that we caused in their homeland. So what do? There's several things. My America Works program is actually one of them. It basically takes the idea of, and this is going to be terrible, whoever was the president during the Great Depression, and I want to say it was Roosevelt.
FDR.
Who?
FDR, I believe.
FDR. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so oops, I missed my 45 seconds. Point being, he created jobs where people dug holes and paid them for it, and then to fill them back up again. Not saying that's what we do specifically for the immigrants, but there are a myriad of tasks that could be accomplished. My apologies for going over anyway.
No problem. And I want everyone to be patient because I didn't even talk about Haitian immigrants that were roped up and beaten. I saw that. And
you want?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to ask the question because because I'm the skin color that I am, and I'm seeing people that look. I skipped that whole question because I knew it was going to make me mad. So I just say, no, what, we're going to skip that question.
If you want to ever take it off, if you ever want to take it off sidebar, I was there when the Haitians came to El Paso. I got videos. I got everything. That was the only time I ever almost. Oh man,
you're a better man than me, Frankie, because I'd be in prison for defending them.
Now here's a side question. Here's a side question I want to ask.
We're going off tangents. Sorry.
Yes, that's okay. And I'm serious when I ask this question, and either one of you can answer it. Why do we never talk about Canada? Have you ever noticed when we talk about building a border, we want to build it in Mexico and not Canada? Have you ever heard Canada out here committing atrocities across the world? Have you ever heard of Canada supporting war? I mean, I'm certain they do. But we just never talk about Canada. We just never do. We talk about Mexico. But it's like, okay, they're there. I know they're there. They're our neighbor to the north. We never talk about building a border there. I wonder why.
I
But
think
I
Frankie needs about 2 or 3 minutes to answer that question. And
I'm not gonna ask it as a serious question. I'm just asking it because I'm like, oh, we're gonna really do
No.
this racism thing? We're gonna really do this?
Oh no, I was gonna say
That's
it's
a-
more than that.
It's
Please,
a
right?
rhetorical
Go ahead.
question. You answer. It's a rhetorical question. That's what it comes.
I
down
know
to.
that, yeah, it's a rhetorical. I'm like, why? They're there. You never hear Canada, okay, we're going to just bomb here, here, and here. And if you don't do what we say, we're going to take your. I mean, maybe they're doing it. And because I don't live in Canada, I live in the United States. But I've had this question, and this is a serious one because I had to get off my, why don't we ever talk about Canada? I want to talk about the funding in Ukraine. And I'm sure we have to talk about the Ukrainian situation. Because it's a situation to me that should, of course, I believe that Joe Biden has never met a war that he didn't love. He's voted for pretty much every war that's ever come across his desk. But here's a question that I want to ask. So Russia, from my understanding, attacked Ukraine because they believe that Ukraine is their like theirs. It's theirs. It belongs to them. And the fact that Ukraine, they were promised that Ukraine wouldn't be a part of NATO. And if I'm saying anything wrong, just kind of correct me. But this is my understanding that Ukraine, they were promised that Ukraine wouldn't be a part of NATO. Then there were talks that Ukraine could be, and that's what made Russia do this attack. My question is, one, what really made Russia do the attack? Second, we put in these economic sanctions against Russia that was supposed to weaken them, but they're still fighting. So they're getting their money from somewhere. And third question, how would you, as a president, address the Ukrainian situation? And for this question, I'm actually going to give you 4 minutes to answer it. Frankie, you go first.
So first off, anybody who didn't see this coming is blind, because previously Russia did have some kind of democratic policies, and you did have to have democracy to vote in a president. And then there were some clauses in the Constitution that basically said if you acquired new land, you can continue your presidency, which has always been something that Putin has been buying. Now, during the pandemic, though, he changed the whole Constitution, so now he never has to really go up for election ever again. So he's taken over that whole country. Now, a lot of people don't know that when the wall went down in Berlin, that was pretty much the end of that war and the fall of the Soviet Union. What a lot of people don't know is Putin was in charge there. And he has a hard-on for the fact that he felt betrayed, because that whole time what happened was when the wall was crumbling is media was capturing all the people cracking through and coming through. And he wanted to fire upon the people, but they refused to do it because there were so many people watching. It would have been a war crime, and it would have really damaged the image. And that was all happening. It kept on getting worse. And he kept on phoning up to Russia, and Moscow was silent. That's where that saying comes from, or whatever the actual saying is. And so they let that crumble under Putin's watch. He got upset about it, went over, rose up the ranks, took over Russia. And he did a great job in really, regenerating that Russian fear and strong, persona. But this has always been an attempt. He has the vision to reunite the Soviet Union, and Ukraine is an asset right there. It gives them a war advantage. It gives them access to the water, closer proximity to be able to attack more land masses and expand that way. Now, the premise was that if Ukraine would have joined NATO, however, they were told if they did not, Russia would not invade. Clearly, they lied. No surprise there. And the reason we're doing so well, even with our sanctions, is because there's all these countries that are opportunists. They said, we like money. We want to make money. The United States has had a monopoly this whole time. If they won't do business with you, we'll do business with you. At which point the United States should have said, if you do business with them, we don't do business with you. Because if my sanction carries to one country, it should carry over to the next one and everybody else who's, helping my enemies. Now, what upsets me is we have such a terrible, set of morals. Because if we're so against communism, why do we have such great relationships with two of the biggest communist nations, but then hold such strict restrictions against Cuba, which is this big? And Cuba, which has so many incredible medical advancements that we could be using right now to help our people and would help lower the cost of medicine and cure certain ailments that we are way behind on, we exclude them for all of our trade. And that's why we're here. So even with the sanctions that we're doing, we're impacted too, because we've created a reliance on these enemies and we're funding their abilities. And now they're using it against us. And even though we sanction them, they're also sanctioning us. Like even with the Middle East, they're threatening to cut off our oil supply because of our decisions. Now we've even tried to negotiate more with Venezuela to get more oil. But anyway, back to Ukraine. I don't mind the funding of helping our allies. Like I said, we have to do it. But I want more oversight because I know how systems work. Like I said, I don't want to get out hustled. If I just give you a blank check and I give you another check, and then you're like, wait a second, money keeps coming in. What is my incentive to say it's getting any better? I could just sit there. We don't have boots on the ground. We're relying on their reporting and their messaging. So the longer they tell us we need money, we keep giving it to them. I have a problem with that. We need to sit there and say, hey, this is the money we're giving you. This is how we're going to use it. I want receipts. I want to see it's being used. Otherwise, tough nuggies. Why am I the only one paying that much? But I do have a problem with us funding so many different wars when we have people hungry on the streets here, especially veterans.
Sam, you may now proceed.
So what would I do as president to deal with Mother Russia and Ukraine? Thank you for the history lesson, by the way. I knew Putin was KGB during the Cold War. I did not realize he took it that personally, but it makes a lot of sense. So one of the first thoughts I had, not necessarily because of that, but was it seems like our leadership and our foreign policies are still locked in the Cold War era. And a lot of the people who are still prominent, Henry Kissinger, of all the people, sorry, we're keeping it calm. Of all the people who should not have any influence at all in American foreign policy, that man is number one. Speaking of putting people on trial at The Hague, he's also very high on my list. So all of my answers about dealing with Israel, dealing with Ukraine, dealing with all these different things has been very biblical. And there's a reason for it. We have a military and we have an economy, and we should use both to the fullest extent, legally and morally and ethically possible. And ideally, diplomacy would resolve it. If words could work, by all means, I feel like I'm fairly charismatic, fairly convincing, fairly reasonable to discuss things with, open to new ideas and discussions and finding compromise. But when that compromise or the discussion, one side is genocide or the one side is eliminating someone else's sovereignty, then the only option is to say no. And the economic sanctions have clearly not worked because, again, they are now finding trade relationships with other nations. Why? Because we keep sticking our nose in everybody else's business. So why are all these tensions rising? Sure, we can say the natural resources, the money, the economy, blah, blah, blah. But it comes down to we aren't being good international neighbors. We just aren't. And yes, China has historically been, now I forgot the phrase. I remember reading this about them too. They just love to get other nations indebted to them. It's like, oh yeah, sure, here you go. They did that for thousands of years. They're doing it now. That's why they invested all their money in their mass transit system, healthcare, and infrastructure. That is why they have the best high-speed rail systems in the world and why they keep innovating. We should be putting our resources, including our military, to that use, making our country better, stronger, more efficient, more healthy, more, I don't know, better for the people. Crazy thought. And all these proxy wars that we keep fighting to rehash the Cold War, everybody who wants to bang that drum, they can go on the front lines. That's actually written in one of my policies. If you want to go to war, you get to vote for it, and then you get to go on a plane with a backpack and a rifle and get to go to the front lines. Maybe then you'll learn your lesson. Until then, yes, economic sanctions. But I believe in this case with Ukraine and Russia, the sanctions aren't enough. You almost have to take military intervention or, again, bring charges up in the international community. The thing is, how much suffering and destruction do you allow to occur before you put a stop to it? And how much before that escalates into something even worse? We need to find solutions to our problems that do not revolve around warfare. Again, we have not evolved past feudalism for 12,000 years. We are still beating each other with sticks and arrows. We got to get out of that. And I think focusing on our own domestic problems first, becoming better international neighbors, and forcing people to the diplomatic tables through economic might is, I think, the best way to do that.
I can't believe we're up to our last question. There's so many more questions I have. I have the unfortunate task of tomorrow watching the Republican debate. The Democrats aren't having one, so I only have one other choice, and that's the Republican national debate for president. And Nikki Haley and former candidate Mike Pence, because he has since dropped out of the field, and some of the more conservative, and Vivek Ramaswamy, I won't say any of my opinions about him, but none of them are good. My question comes in this fashion. It seems that this current administration is pushing for war. And here's how I'll say it. So when the attack on Israel happened by Hamas, Israel started talking about expanding into Lebanon and Syria and all these countries. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. They just bombed you. You're now going to expand this war. Then you hear talk from the administration, oh, we need to engage with Iran. Personally, I didn't know Iran did anything to us. So this is where my knowledge of foreign policy is just, trust me, when we do domestic, I'm going to be right on my P's and my Q's because I know more about it. But this is where I'm just not as strong as I would like to be. So we hear things in Congress about, these radicals on both sides saying we should bomb Iran and we should bomb, I forget the other countries that they're talking about. Again, one, I didn't even know Iran did anything to us. Second, we're just going to let Saudi Arabia just stand out there and they're the actual one. Here comes my question. I know I'm going to ask a question without making all these statements. So, and China. Everyone keeps saying China is the threat. Apparently, I must be silly because I thought that America was China's number one export. In other words, they export the most things to America. So why would they want to start a war with the country where they're getting the most money from? I don't understand that. Where is this? Like, I keep hearing more and more about China. We gotta get Russia and China under control. How do you stop that? Because I know where it's coming from. It's coming from the military-industrial complex. But how do you, as president, stop all of this? We got to go to war and we got to defend because they're going to come through the Mexican border and we need to get the. I know my question is all over the place, but essentially what I'm asking is, How do you stop this as president in terms of us always being in some type of war? We've been in a war ever since, well, basically the American Revolutionary War. I mean, we went from that, we went from World War II to the Korean War to the Vietnam War to Desert Storm to Afghan. I mean, we're always in a war. How do you stop that type of trajectory, knowing that if you win, you're going to have people in Congress that think like we always have to be in war? And so, with that, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to answer that question. So, you have 5 full minutes. Frankie, you can go first.
Well, just because I wanted to touch upon it before, there's a little math question I like to use to explain people, because I know we just talk about billions like it's nothing, and we throw hundreds of billions to all these countries and everything. Let's talk about what $1 billion is. Columbus sailed the seas in 1492. That was 531 years ago. That is, with the exception of leap years, 193,815 days. If you times that by making $5,000 a day, you still don't have $1 billion. So $1 billion is more than $5,000 a day for 531 years. Anyway, so just so we have a concept of what money really actually is. Now, as far as China goes, you have to remember too, our trade with China is a little tricky. It's because China as a whole is not really China. Most of the economic growth and all the trade is with Hong Kong, which is independent-ish from China. Does mainland China reap the benefits of the People's Republic? Absolutely, which is why they keep that going there. China as a whole does not like us. They are one of our biggest assets. But China, from Hong Kong's perspective, that's where we do our business. People don't necessarily know the difference, which is why they keep trying to expand China and even go into Taiwan because of economic growth and possibilities. And Taiwan has a lot of resources and a lot of great assets, which is why that's always constant hostility. They are not our friends. They are not. I don't know if that's our own perception, because think about it. If we're using all of their resources, and I don't know if we do those relationships in the sense of because of how much we contribute to their GDP. Because in theory, if we're contributing to 13 out of 15 of their GDP, then if we put those sanctions, we're crippling their economy. So I don't know if that's our defense mechanism to fund these countries so much that if we did apply those sanctions, we would be having that beneficial. But in reality, we don't need to do that. We have the same resources. We have those renewable ones. We have a lot of the same minerals which we use to export from China. It all comes down to money and how people can profit. It's all about keeping that. It's known. Labor fares are way cheaper in China than they are here. So we're going to get more bang for our buck when we do it that way. So that's one of the reasons why we keep funding those areas. And as for stopping wars, it's all about diplomacy. We have these big companies like Boeing and any other kind of weaponry that sit there and they create these military vessels, they create these weapons, they make money. And at the end of the day, they give it to the politicians, and that's what keeps these wars going. It's known. That's how we've been doing it. Even when Iran was fighting Iraq, we were funding both sides, pretending like Iran was our ally. Imagine that. We're like, hey, guys, you got this. Here's some weapons. And then go to Iraq, say, hey, they got these weapons. Let's give them these. You know, it's terrible practices that we've been doing historically. And until we sit there and have somebody who doesn't care about the money, who actually cares about humanity, because we are modern civilization. It's not days of the Mongolian era where Genghis Khan is sitting there trying to take over the world. No, we have now. We're all educated. We understand what these weapons can do. And the fact that we know what they can do and we know the damage and carnage and we still decide to use them is disgusting. Like, it's not a video game. You don't just respawn. Like, people are dying. You're creating generational trauma. You know, war is not the answer. War is not the way. We can work so much better if we actually stopped and focused on that diplomacy and actual good relationships. But a matter of is nobody makes money like that.
You had 58 seconds. You could have went. Okay, so
I mean,
now, now, Samuel, you have 5 minutes.
So I believe I've addressed some of these points of the question, which is what to do about the China problem. How do I address the concerns with foreign powers and, again, rehashing the Red Scare, the Cold War, what have you? And that's all it really is. World War II ended, and then it actually didn't, because then we had the Korean War, and then that ended. Oh, wait, it didn't, because then we had the Vietnam War. Oh, wait, that was, not nearly enough. So then we had to rehash the Cold War and so on and so forth. So it goes back to, we need to get the war hawks out of office by holding them accountable to their actions. And I do believe the provision that I added into my policies of, if you want to declare war, if you want to engage in military conflict and vote for it, you, the congressman or senator who voted for it, shall, not might, could be or will be, shall be on the front lines. You will put your money where your mouth is. I am not going to sacrifice my life for your greed and your corruption. That's one way to address it domestically. How to repair our foreign relations, that's a much harder problem, right? Because the United States has a history of acting a certain way. You have Putin, who's been there since forever, and you have other nations who also have similar behaviors. At the end of the day, corporations is what actually run most of Western nations, as they're usually referenced. And so the bigger problem is, how do you address corporate interests, their greed, their corruption, their power and influence? Well, lobbying is legalized bribery. So the first thing that the president can and must do is to make lobbying illegal. Plain and simple. Secondly, corporations have zero rights in the United States of America, according to the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution does business or corporation exist. Coincidentally, neither does Bible, Torah, or Quran. So interestingly, the two most prolific reasons why politicians justify their actions, money and religion, have zero basis in the Constitution whatsoever. So being able to regulate those things and hold them accountable is of paramount importance. And in so doing, you will resolve many of our domestic and foreign issues. To the point of China has cheap labor. Okay, that's kind of a human rights violation. I think they get complaints every single year, and they're just, well, we have veto power, so we don't care. One of the problems with our international legal system. That being said, American parts last longer. They're better. They are everywhere, right? But the cheap reusable stuff, right? The plastic bottles, the cell phones, the iPhones, the t-shirts, probably this tie, if I'm, unfortunately, these are all made in China cheaply. But interestingly enough, the argument about raising minimum wages and so on and so forth is, well, the cost of a cheeseburger will go up. Okay. Well, the minimum wage in Denmark is $20 an hour, and a Big Mac is cheaper in Denmark than it is in the United States. So again, the issue is corruption in the face and form of corporate greed. It's the same thing with our current economy. We are not suffering from inflation. We are not. We are suffering from price gouging and the illusion of inflation because of unchecked corporate greed. And when you multiply that on a global economic scale, you get what we're getting now. So holding corporations accountable is the first solution. The second solution is bringing jobs and manufacturing and textiles back to the United States with the America Works program. Again, FDR hired people to dig holes, fill them back up again. Surely we can rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Surely we can create a fiber optic, nationwide, end-to-end, coast-to-coast network. Surely we can become green energy and not oil dependent. Surely we have the means to encourage, through tax incentives, tax breaks, or whatever else, to go from oil and gas to some other clean energy. Same thing with timber. Why are we deforesting when we could literally grow hemp on the same exact fields that we grow corn, and it would actually benefit both crops? And it wouldn't take up additional space, and it would make the people growing the corn and the beans and the soy that much more money.
I know it was annoying, but that was the last question.
I had a good ending though. That
You
was
had,
not
you
a bad
did,
place to end my statement, so I'm not
you
mad.
ended strong. You ended strong. I want to thank both of you. Again, this is completely us starting this late is my fault. I emailed the wrong link. I don't know. Well, I know because I have something else that I'm dealing with on a personal level, so I just kind of got things confused. But I want to thank you both for this discussion. Hopefully, when we have our next discussion in March, we'll have more participation and we will be talking about something I'm very familiar with, domestic issues. So we'll keep your um, calendars open or whatever. But I want to give you both 30, maybe 45 seconds to tell people how they can connect with both of your campaigns. Sam, I'll let you go first.
Perfect. So it's very easy to get a hold of me. You can Google my name, Samuel Ronan, and my website's the first thing that shows up. You can also go to www.samronan.com outright. There are a myriad of policy positions. I definitely have the desire to add more. It's just a matter of, formatting and this, that, and the other. But you can go to the website. You can contact me there. You can volunteer. Always could use more volunteer support. Or in general, email me at sam.ronan@samronan.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Honestly, send me your questions. Share the website, make fun of me, pick on me, whatever. It's up to you. That's the whole point. That's the point of American democracy. So I look forward to hearing from you, good, bad, or otherwise.
Frankie, you may go. And Frankie, look for an email from me inviting you to be our a guest on the Tracy Show, which is a Thursday. That'll be coming because I've invited Sam. He did his on a Saturday, but I haven't had you as a guest by yourself yet. So go ahead and tell us how we can connect to your campaign.
I can also be Googled. I use the website. You can use lozada2024.com or Frankie for us, number 4. I like that one better. It's a little bit more personal. My team's always pretty proactive with trying to respond to all. We do get a lot. Obviously, volunteers, crucial. If you want to download, you like what you heard, you want a little bit more, reach out to us. You could donate to our campaign. We are on the Democratic Party, so we do use Act Blue as our platform. I believe it's also CrowdPack. We need this kind of thing. I've opted out from having a lot of corporate money. I don't like owing anything to anybody that's not the people. So it's really going to be an uphill battle this upcoming weeks. I'm working on getting on my ballot access. South Carolina is definitely a big one. They want $20,000 to be put on their primary, which we're wondering if we should do it given the dynamic of how they move the primary around. But more than likely, we will probably file with them. Still under discussion. So, but check us out. I love to hear from you. I love to understand what everybody's perspectives and coming from. And please understand that I'm flexible. Like, I know I'm on the Democratic line, but I love to engage in conversation because you have the ability to expand my perception and let me see your vision and how you perceive certain things, which could eventually lead to a better understanding on different things.
Thank you both. We did not scream at each other. We were respectful. I was all over the place, but I appreciate it. Please share this discussion. I don't ask you all to share. Oh, I do. But this one, I'm specifically, did I get that word right? Yes, specifically asking to share this. This is one of the best interviews I've done, period. I was hesitant to have 2 guests because I didn't know how that was going to go, but this went far better than I thought. I will go back in and put both gentlemen's websites in the description. That'll be probably within 20 to 35 minutes. I will email their campaigns if they want to share this on their social medias. They are glad to. But again, please share this video, like this video, and remember to subscribe. Everybody, thank you so much for joining this discussion. I had a great time. I can't wait till March. It'll be on a better subject, which will be domestic issues. Tell you now, I know about domestic issues, so it's going to be a much cleaner show and much clearer questions. But last reminder, join me tomorrow at 7:45. No, I'm sorry, 8 o'clock for the Republican debates. They are tomorrow. We're going to have fun. We always do. I just watch it. I tell you what I'm thinking. That'll be live tomorrow at 8 o'clock. 8 a.m. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mac, for joining. Thank you, everyone that commented. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.